Hello, dear colleagues. We continue our working day and we'll talk about the topic everyone should work on the reforms, government, parliament and citizens, the results of 6 months of work of NGO Agro.ReformsUA. And the speakers are Oleksiy Pavlenko, Minister of Agrarian Policy and Food of Ukraine, Oleg Protsenko, Head of the NGO Agro.ReformsUA, Dmytro Simashko, expert on agrarian law, Oleksandr Pochkun, NGO Agro.ReformsUA, and Anatoliy Miroshnichenko, led reforms roadmap creator. Also Oleksandr Sushko, an expert in agrarian policy. Hello, colleagues. First of all, I'd like to thank the Renaissance Foundation for their support. Oleksiy Pavlenko and his ministry, who are ready to work and to continue reforms in the agrarian sector, which is a key sector in the economy of Ukraine. So I give the floor to him. Hello, everybody. I'll start with general things and then we'll hark back to some specific things. We have very interesting times today where we have to do a lot. I can tell you a lot about agrarian sector, for instance, that it amounts to 15% of GDP, and maybe this is even 25 to 30. And the matter is that we have very interesting times now when we have to do a lot. And I think that people who are doing a lot today are not just people who say that everything is bad somewhere back in the kitchen, but people who really work on reforms connected to real deregulation. And I want to thank those guys because, you know, we had a project connected to deregulation. We were able to cancel a lot of documents that were necessarily earlier, and we are now working on the single window, one window approach. The principle is that the lesser is the involvement of state officials, the lesser is the level of corruption. And this is the assessment of such companies as Cargill, Nobel, and so on. So these are real steps that were done in order to produce some special results. And of course, there's a lot of not very popular things and topics like, for instance, land reform. And not every expert would go to people on the level of a district or something like this, and we have to have feedback to understand what are we doing and what's the reaction of the society. My special thanks go to Renaissance Foundation, who were prompt in responding to our request. And of course, there's quite a lot being done together with the ministry. There's a rather serious team working on the level of the ministry. And I want to tell you there's a very pleasant news today. We have opened the Chinese market. This is a mega news. Everybody worked on this, and when we showed our Chinese colleagues what we were able to do with the seaport logistics, you know, as in a puzzle, everything is interconnected. So when you complete one block, then there's the effect going much further. Officially, I thank everyone, and I ask more and more public activists join the team which works in the public sector, in the agrarian sector. I'm sure that a lot of common work is still awaiting us. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Oleksiy, for such kind words. Everybody should work on reforms. This is a key message that is in the basis of our public organization, which unites volunteers, scientists, experts with a long-standing experience and successful foreign practice, who are ready to constructively take part in the reform. Our first event was reform breakfasts that gave an opportunity to experts to talk to the ministry and businessmen. As a result, the joint search for the solution of problems that are there in the agrarian sector, and the conclusion is that the deregulation that is actively done in Ukraine should correspond very closely to the norms of EU, because otherwise some export of agrarian produce may stop. Well, this is the key export item in Ukraine and amounts to 37% of the entire export of the country. For the first time, they created the land reform roadmap. We conducted debates and roundtables in Kiev, and also they were held in regions. Anatoliy Miroshnichenko will dwell on this. The principles that were discovered during our reform breakfasts were the basis for our anti-corruption fight. We visited 10 regions. We conducted 10 roundtables with representatives of small and medium-sized business in order to have an idea what kind of reform the farmers want. As a result, we collected more than 100 suggestions that are needed for the farmers. This starts with the abolition of corruption while they are getting their plots of land, and ending with the dismantling of different barriers that are in the way of exporting produce. Anatoliy Simashko will dwell on this. There was also a financial diagnosis of 37 state enterprises. Anatoliy Pochkun will dwell on this. Our expert took an active part in developing the strategy of development of different sectors and regions. We hope that the strategy that was developed will be soon and realized in a quality way and comprehensively as well. The lack of financing of small and medium-sized farmers made our participants to actively popularize the project of Agrarian IOU, as this is a good opportunity to involve additional financing for turnover capital. Bohdan Khomyak will dwell on this. So this is in brief what we are engaged in, and I give the floor to Oleksandr Sushko from Renaissance Foundation, who will tell us more. Thank you very much, Oleg. Thank you, Mr. Minister. It is not typical for our foundation, and it does not correspond to our classical mandate to support projects in the agrarian sector. It is evident that the present extraordinary conditions made us to reconsider our traditional approaches and to join public initiatives in the spheres that we were not represented in earlier or traditionally. The main motivation to join the joint efforts of public and government were several conditions. First, that it is there that we see the rather evident and positive practice of government and public cooperating. You don't have to push anyone to do this. These relations are being formed from beneath. due to active efforts on both sides, and there's a synergy that provides a certain new culture of interaction between the authorities and civil society, for which has been the aim of the Renaissance Foundation for many, many years. We understood that the entire subject of the project is rather close to us. And you know, we probably were not active in the agrarian sphere, but we were always active in anti-corruption sphere. And the initiatives that they requested us to support, we considered them, and we decided that this is a very important practice when the initiatives on the local level produce some stuff that leads to the lowering of the level of corruption, and corruption is high where the level of regulation is high, and the efforts that provided good expertise on the one hand and quick implementation of this expertise and the recommendations, you know, we were attracted by this model of interaction and cooperation that provides a rather quick positive result that has to be visible not only to the participants in the process, but also to the business, to the broad public, as we all are expecting, and we especially want to help those reforms that the society can feel in order to overcome a deep skepticism which often is present in the society, where people say nothing is happening. So we are very sensitive to the initiatives that can bring quick results. So we are going on with this cooperation, and we follow very closely what will be the results of this project, how visible and how significant they will be, and how they will be noted at a higher level, probably. And of course, this is only part of the efforts of the foundation aimed at supporting the reforms, but I do hope that this will become one of the notable stories of success of our cooperation this year.
Thank you, Alexander. It's my pleasure to give the floor to Igor Simashko, expert on agrarian law. Good afternoon. I would like to mention that Deregulation against corruption is a rather unique project. This is for the first time when we contacted SMEs representatives. Local level, we spoke to various subsectors of the agrarian sphere in more than 10 oblasts, and result of our cooperation is as follows. We have more than 100 recommendations how the obstacles for the agrarian sector development could be removed, and we are ready to implement that recommendations. We try to apply the principle smart deregulation, that is balanced and smart deregulation measures are to be implemented. We contact with farmers, with agrarian associations, various representatives of agrarian sector expertise, and currently we discuss how we could repeal 43 regulating documents and procedures involving different subsectors of the agriculture. For example, farmers suggest that the limitation of 300 cubic meters per day imposed on water production should be removed, because 300 cubic meters per day is not enough to water the fields and to provide water to the animals. That's why we now thinking about proper water meters and fair prices for water. I think that simplification of this procedure will allow to save resources, will allow to decrease time necessary to get in all the permits and licenses. The agrarian sector suffers very much from financial situation in the country, and farmers quite often suffer from the discretion of the bureaucrats. That's why the regulation here is very important. At the very beginning, during our roundtables, the farmers complained that there was a very complicated procedure for engaging part-time labor force in the agrarian sector. For example, it was not possible to involve people for just for 2-3 days for seasonal works. Now we suggest to introduce such a novelty as the collective temporary work contract. Currently, we have posted it on our website. You can see it there, and we invite you to discussion about it. Quite often, farmers complained about expert duty for export of livestock, and which was introduced in 1990s and mid-1990s, and actually it is very harmful because it makes our livestock export non-competitive in the foreign markets. That's why we suggest to repeal this duty, and thus to strengthen development potential of the Ukrainian economy. It's my pleasure to give the floor to Dmytro Simashko. As for the roadmap of the land reform, it has the same leitmotif, deregulation, and comprises the following initiatives as parts of the land reform. First of all, put an end for the to the designed purpose of the land use. Then the corrupt mechanism of the state land designation expertise. Then we should repeal mandatory land designation procedure, then compulsory procedure of land auctions, and there should be simplified procedure for electronic tenders and auctions. We should introduce the mechanism for free privatization. Actually, as of today, this procedure is used for the alienating of the community lands and privatizing of community lands. Then we should resolve many technical issues like disposal of property, real property, which is located on the community land. We should considerably deregulate the land lease relations. We should not simplify state registration of real estate property, and it should be cancelled in general. If we want to have a special titling procedure for the land, then it should be introduced. All the steps, all the provisions of the land reform roadmap are supplemented with corresponding draft laws. And now I'd give the floor to Oleksandr Pochkun, who will speak about the diagnostics. It's quite often that corruption penetrates not just to public administration, but to the use and holding of the state property. The last month, we carried out property diagnostics of 30 state properties in order to establish that this state property is not managed properly. In order to do this, we have involved 7 the most reputable auditing companies, auditing firms. They have carried out this work. They carried out managerial audit and came to conclusion that out of that 30 state enterprises, only one appeared to be profitable. The efficiency of the property use is very low, while in the private sector, similar enterprises show rather high profitability and high efficiency. Lack of automated accounting, absence of internal control, all these features confirm that very understandable, very predictable fact that the state management of these enterprises is inefficient. And now we understand that we should carry out more detailed financial audit, decide about their future managerial course for them. This work appeared to be very useful, I think, for the ministry, and currently the ministry very clearly understands what is the situation with the state enterprises working in agrarian sector. And now I give the floor to Ruslan Pavlenko. I will speak about agrarian IAOs, and we work on introducing international experience here, and the agrarian IAOs is actually application of international experience first tested in Brazil. We work with NCH, one center is Syngenta companies on this, and in Poltava Oblast we managed to engage 34 point something million hryvnia for each borrower, which for all the borrowers, farmers in Poltava region, which actually meant more than 3 million for each lender. Currently, under conditions of sanation procedure in our banking system, we expect that it will become more healthy, and next year this experience will be used even more broadly across the entire country. This experience is considered to be strategic for the reforming process in the agrarian sector. I agree with what was said about state enterprises. We have Oleksiy who is dealing with the privatization issues. Actually, this audit of state enterprises should be very quickly prepared for privatization, because we clearly see that the only possible way to their efficiency is to privatize them. That big 8 or 9 auditing company, they proved that this is the only possible way out. The same is true about the land reform, jointly with Ministry of Economy and the Ministry of Regional Building. In Poltava, they held a joint session and made decision about very quick movement towards land reform, and I suggest to prepare our suggestions to this end by the next cabinet of ministers. The agrarian IOs are a good solution for involving additional investment to the agrarian sector. Our capitalization ratio of capitalization per 1 hectare is twice lower than in Poland, and while we could have at least the same, and fertilizers, seeds, etc. This all are goods which allow to borrow funds under the pledge of the future crop, and this may push considerably development of SMEs and small and medium-sized farmers. And our aim is to carry out complete reloading of agrarian insurance system. Unfortunately, this proved to be totally corrupt sector in the agrarian area, and now we are thinking how to start this how to restart this process. And I always invite investors to the ministry and invite them to discussion and invite them to get involved into different our projects, which are different parts of the same puzzle of reform. This is a good example. I believe that on the ground of this reform, we can bring together businesses, government officials, NGOs. We have managers of big companies which are very busy, and at the same time, we have academics in the agrarian sphere who also participate in this process. Thank you to the Renaissance Foundation for the support of this project.
Thank you very much. And I would like also to thank the Renaissance Foundation for their support, to Oleksiy, Pavlenko and his team in the ministry for their openness and the support that we get. Thank you for listening and hearing us and for your participation. I would also like to ask to continue in this vein and to cooperate and to take into account all our reforming initiatives, so that our initiatives are heard and the farmers and the public feel the results of these reforms, because the symbiosis of the public and government is a key factor of success. We have time for a couple of quick questions. Alina Zemenko, Union, my question is to the minister. Could you tell us, we got to know that the ministry is looking at the possibility to launch the land market in some regions, and whether this is possible and whether the government supports you. Last Friday we had a sitting of our cabinet of ministers in Poltava region, and we were at heart of our agrarian business because Poltava region is one of the leading our regions in our agrarian sector. And there was also the presentation with the state cadastre about the deregulation of the land market, and we were talking about further steps connected to the cancellation of the moratorium. First of all, we arrived at the conclusion that we should make the state cadastre transparent and understandable. There's a lot of desire on the part of the World Bank to take part in this project. The second issue is inventorization, and the third block is legislation. There should be a law on the land market, on the turnover of land, and we should also think about the pilot projects where there are state enterprises, and you know that they have almost 3 million hectares of land. There should be a revision where this land is, how it should be used, because, as I say, every plot of land has to have a name and surname. Everyone understands that there's a huge land market, but because of ineffective cadastre, almost 1.5 million hectares of land are in the shadow turnover. And we are also in favor of launching the pilot project of selling land. We have suggested that our experts work on this. Despite all the political demagogy, we should already work on this, and we hope for joint working groups who will suggest 8 first regulatory acts on the land market and simplification of procedures and all this kind of stuff. No, we still don't have any specific region which will pilot this project. And of course, Poltava region is among those who are working the best way among this, and we hope that next year, and I am very grateful to our donors, because not only Ukrainian holdings taking part in this, but also EBRD, FAO, and other international institutions. We do want to launch this project everywhere in Ukraine. I'm very grateful, and the next speakers are here. You can continue your meeting in another location. Please come again to us, and our next briefing is within 1